And welcome to this Ignite webcast. My name is Josh Chopal, and I'm a program manager for Office 365. And Ignite events are a series of technical workshops for IT professionals and Microsoft partners. And this Ignite webcast series will address different technical subjects and scenarios that are really beneficial to anyone who wants to increase their knowledge of the Office 365 suite. So today we're happy to have Andy O'Donnell as our presenter, and Andy will be giving us a peek inside Office 365 and the Office 365 architecture. So we're lucky to have Andy with us today. Andy is a senior product marketing manager for Office 365, and he has extensive knowledge of the Office 365 suite. So today's webcast will be about an hour, and we'll leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end to field any questions from anyone on the call. So if you can, please hold your questions till the end during our Q&A portion. And if you have a question, just go ahead and type it into the link chat window. So one last thing is that we are recording today's session, and we'll have that available online on the community blog post, as well as the material that Andy is presenting today. And you can find that here. The blog post is right. I just pasted it in. So that's it for me. And so Andy, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Josh. As Josh said, I'm Andy O'Donnell. I'm going to be giving an overview of Office 365 and talking a little bit about some of the architecture and how the pieces fit together, and just deepen your knowledge about how we run the service here at Microsoft. For this session, I would say it's more of kind of a breadth session covering a lot of different aspects of the service and what makes it up versus going deep into any one specific area of the service. And I'll also do a quick demonstration of the administration portal during the session, just to give you kind of an overview of that from an admin experience. I will not be doing any demo of sort of the end user features of functionality, and I believe that there are other sessions that have covered that type of technology in other times. So if you're looking for that, please look at some of the other webcasts for that sort of information updates. So when we think about Office 365, if we just think about what we want to look at here today for the agenda. First, we want to start off with kind of making sure everyone has a base level understanding of what Office 365 is. There have definitely been, with the recent commercial launch at the end of February, there have been some additions to the Office 365 set of services, and we'll talk just quickly about those. We'll talk about how what happens to infrastructure when you think about moving to Office 365, and where do all of those servers that you use to run and maintain yourself go, and how do we think about it. And then finally, we'll talk about how the individual services that make up Office 365 fit together, and what that means from a workload capacity standpoint. How do things like identity, your desktop software, your sharing and communications, how do those workloads change and move as you think about using Office 365, which is really software as a service. It's not infrastructure as a service, and it's not a platform as a service, although you can do some platform type things with it. It's really more software as a service. And so we'll spend a lot of time just walking through what that means for customers. So just to set the stage, kind of very high level, there's really sort of two things that have been changing in the industry recently. I'm sure everyone on the call is very familiar with these two aspects. On the one side, from an end user perspective, there has been really a massive shift in the types of devices that people are connecting to their networks to access data. Basically, the biggest shift is moving away from the idea of every device being managed, right? Instead of having tight control and managed devices, there's more and more an influx of people wanting to be able to work wherever they are from whatever device, and that's causing, a massive gold rush in terms of different form factors and devices, and people wanting to get work done across all of those. The other trend, of course, has been, this on the server side. It sort of started with the virtualization trend 10 years ago, but it's really morphed now as we've been moving more and more workloads to higher capacities. And the analogy I always like to think about is really when you look at the early days of electricity, and lots of companies and cities set up their own power plants. But it very quickly people realized very quickly that it was much easier to just have a few power plants that supplied everyone within a geographic region. And that you could get much larger, economies of scale doing that. And that's sort of the same thing that we're really seeing with a lot of these IT infrastructures, and particularly with services and the move, of course, to the cloud. So as we think about those, Office 365 is really looking at how can we make sure that we're providing all of the tools to help people access across those different devices, and that's really where Office 365 has a lot of things like the web app, the Office web apps, and the mobile clients, as well as what are we doing to make sure businesses have a robust set of tools and controls and configuration that they can manage and still have control, even as some of the hardware and operational level is no longer in their hands. So how can they still control? To use the same analogy, this is watching your power consumption, if you will, in the move away from running the power plant yourself. You still want to be able to make sure you're managing what you're using. So we'll go and take a look at how Office 365 is really addressing some of these trends, and how really this focus will be more on the server side today. So Office 365, most of you are probably familiar with the fact that it is a cloud versions of Exchange, SharePoint, and Lync. So that's our messaging and email platform, our file sharing and sites platform, and our business communications platform. And that was when we launched almost 2 years ago, Office 365. That was really the core of the service offering. But there have been some additions to that as well. Particularly here with the recent commercial launch, probably the most significant one is Office 365 Pro Plus. This is the new Office client. So if you've heard of Office 2013, Office 365 Pro Plus is the same client bits, and I'll spend a lot of time talking about that. But really, the distinction that you want to keep in mind is that when we refer to a version of Office with 2013 in the title, such as Office Professional Plus 2013, we're referring to the perpetual license, the traditional MSI install. Office 365 Pro Plus, on the other hand, while it's the same technology, the same exact features today, it is actually a subscription service tied to the user, and it is delivered with a new click-to-run technology and has other benefits. And I'll have, again, a whole section of this presentation to talk a little bit more about that. But it's definitely one of the most exciting additions here in the recent updating to Office 365. We've also brought Project Online, so traditionally we thought of as Project Server, and Project Professional for Office 365. So the Project desktop client software is also available as a service. So both of those are the new Project Online service. And we've brought Visio Pro for Office 365. So similar to the Office client, you can get that as a service as well. So we're always, excited to onboard new services to Office 365 and integrate. And there's some other smaller services also I'll mention as we go through that we've onboarded as well. So we're continually adding more services to the Office 365 suite. So when we look at some of the core benefits of Office 365, it's really the first and main one now with the inclusion of Office 365 Pro Plus. It's really that people can now get the traditional Office apps, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, on the desktop. They can get those now as part of the service. And then, of course, there are the Office web apps, which saw a major refresh with the recent launch, with a lot of feature improvements, better support for advanced HTML5 and JavaScript, and performance improvements across all of the latest browsers. So that works whatever kind of a tablet or mobile OS people happen to be using. Another major benefit is the fact that it's always up to date, meaning that because it is software as a service, Microsoft is patching the servers, updating the software on behalf of the customer, so that people know that businesses and IT departments no longer have to worry about pushing out those updates, and we can push them out much faster at a very, very large scale. And that also means going forward, when we start thinking about new features coming out with Office 365, you don't have to then ever pay for the new version. You just get the new features as they come out, and those are just included in your subscription. There's the idea of buying 2010 and then buying 2013 and doing the upgrade goes away in the Office 365 world. Another aspect, as we mentioned before, is making sure we have optimized experiences for common devices. I think a great example of this is if you've tried out the new Outlook web app on a tablet or on a phone, you'll see the optimized experience there, where we've completely designed the Outlook web app to look differently depending on the different screen that you're on, and we've really spent a lot of time touch optimizing that experience as well. The other major benefit, because it is software as a service, that means that we use our advanced data centers, which will be the whole next section of the presentation, to really make sure we can provide a high availability and reliability of the service and give customers an uptime that is difficult to achieve in the traditional data center model. And this is definitely, again, back to that analogy of the running your own power plant. This is definitely one of the benefits here of having large at-scale power plants. We don't really think about things as an individual server. If an individual server goes down, that's not it. Things are thought about in terms of more of the farm level, and we have so much redundancy and failover that we're able to provide a much higher sense of reliability. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and how many versions and servers we have, for example. Of course, while we are managing the server infrastructure, we still give all of the management controls, the administration controls are still available. So the traditional Exchange Admin Center, the SharePoint Admin, and Link are available for IT to do configurations and configure it for their environment. So instead of spending the time, patching servers and maintaining them and thinking about your DAGs, you instead spend the time creating the business rules and really syncing with the business part of your organization and figuring out how to get the most benefits out of things like Exchange, SharePoint, and Link from that aspect, and how to manage those to fit with your policies in your company. And lastly, I have another slide quickly touching on some of the security aspects of Office 365, but there are a lot of certifications that Office 365 gets that are industry standards, such as ISO 27001, which help provide a level of clarification and third-party certification around the processes and security of Office 365, so that you have confidence in the service itself and how it's being run. And we'll touch a little bit more on those a little later. So the first part really is when we think about when you're moving to Office 365, what happens to all of your data, and what happens to where the data centers, and how do we think about data centers, and how is the service actually getting delivered to the customers? So here's just a picture of one of our data centers in Europe, and now we'll talk a little bit more about sort of the network and the data centers themselves. So what is the infrastructure which we've been able to and how we're going to be able to provide the service at scale. So here you can see, when we think about Microsoft's global footprint, we have data centers located all around the world, somewhere between 10 and 100. We don't exactly say how many, but every data center has at least one replication data center that it's always mirroring itself with, and those data centers host the actual data with which customers have their content stored. And the data centers also, we keep data within specified regions based on the country that a company signs up for their Office 365 subscription. And we have detailed maps on the Office 365 Trust Center showing you what data is stored where exactly. But think of the main regions as being the Americas, Europe, and then what we call APAC, or the Asian Pacific area. Then when you think about the actual code, we have what our content delivery network, or the edge nodes that are all around the world. And this is where we can actually get the code of Office 365 closer. So not customer data. Your data is not sitting inside of an edge node, but things like the code that actually run the service are. So the code for the Outlook web app, the code for the Office web apps, things that make that much more responsive, so the feeling is much quicker, makes the application much more responsive in the browser, and really speeds up the performance. But that aspect is we can cache that locally much closer to the individual customers. And then, of course, we have a large network. Microsoft is usually considered within the third or fourth largest network provider there. We have large, peering agreements with a lot of different providers, and have a very deep backbone which we can deliver our service to customers throughout the world. So this really provides, again, great performance no matter where people happen to be using the service at a given point in time. So now just kind of zooming in to get a little more granular on when we think about the network delivery aspects. When we have, the data centers, we then, and the edge nodes, how do we actually connect that to the customer? So from the edge nodes, that's really the handoff. The edge nodes, again, are still within Microsoft's network, and it's really then where we connect to the metro solution areas, which are the kind of the internet exchange points where we do the handoff to last mile providers that then connect the customers directly to Office 365. And we do, of course, from that standpoint, there are things that can be done there to enhance the performance as well. For example, Link, the technology you're using right now, can use peer-to-peer to improve that last mile delivery for just the aspects of the meeting that is taking place. So now let's take a look. We've talked, macro scale, how all the data centers and the network fit together, but let's take a look sort of just how we think about our data centers and just give you kind of a peek into how those are organized. Really, when you think about the Office 365 data centers, it's a lot more than just servers. It's really a giant power plant, if you will, in terms of it's a lot of heat being generated and trying to dissipate that heat. And so most of the technology really goes into how do we keep the data center cool while using the least amount of electricity possible. And so within each data center, there's some other important aspects such as the chillers, condensers, water supply, the generators, and the transformers. We build our data centers. Often the location of our data centers is based purely on the amount of power we can get to them. So, for example, some of our data centers in Washington has a lot of large rivers, and we build those next to dams so we can get a direct power supply as cheaply and efficiently as possible. And it's also a nice renewable energy source. And so where we locate our data centers it mostly has to do with the quality and the amount of power that we can get when we think of building these massive data centers. Another aspect is the generators. I've had the opportunity to tour the Microsoft data centers before, and the generators are massive, massive diesel engines capable of running the entire data center. We keep enough fuel on hand to run the data center for 3 days in the case of power failure. And these generators are usually, multiple cars stacked on top of each other. They're absolutely massive and very, very interesting to see from that standpoint. But a lot of, again, redundancy within the data center itself to help to help prevent any single point of failure. So when we think about how are these data centers being built, it's really about the power usage effectiveness. And so the total power of the whole facility divided by the IT equipment. Basically, you don't want to spend any electricity on anything other than the servers themselves. And so you try to minimize everything else as much as you can. Now, the building load means all of the electrical aspects, and then, of course, one of the main things that we think about are the chillers, or how you keep everything cool. And so we want to minimize that whenever possible in the way we design our data centers, and just focus all the power on the servers and the network. So when we think about removing heat, there's really been a lot of advances in the last probably about the last 10 years or so in terms of how we are doing the chilling and cooling. We no longer use refrigeration in our data centers because that's very, very inefficient. And we found lots of environmentally friendly ways and low power ways specifically to keep our data centers cool. And so some of the interesting ways are the air handling units that really allow the ability to just bring in outside air, chill that air, often just by running the air over damp chillers, if you will, which brings the air temperature down low enough that we can then cool the data center. Now, here's just kind of a quick overview of the evolution of data centers that we've been using in Microsoft. We've been running data centers for a very long time at Microsoft, going back to some of our earliest services and also customer help. But you can see here, this is just sort of the journey of the data center evolution. The important statistic here is, again, with data center evolution, it's really about the PUE, getting our power efficiency down is the main goal, and getting as close to just having, basically making the building non-existent, right? All of the non-server parts of the workload non-existent. And so you can really see in the last 3 generations there have been some major changes from that area. It used to be all about density and rack deployment, but then, starting with generation 3, it's really where the technology starts to get more advanced in terms of how can we get our data centers even more compact and scalable and modular. So one of the areas there were around these pods or containers. And now these pods or containers are pretty interesting because it's not like we actually go in and fix it, if a disk drive or a computer fails inside one of these containers. It's not like we go and replace that. It is designed, and we order these containers as one unit from our providers. And so a certain number of things inside of each container have to fail before we just have it picked up on a truck and shipped back to the company for maintenance. And this also allows us to just drop in more containers quickly and scale up a data center or scale it down. And these were pretty efficient, but again, we had to hook up air to each individual one. And so we've been moving more to a modular design in our Gen 4 data centers, which allows us just to stand these up. You can notice just barely in the picture that there really aren't walls, so we no longer see a reason to build walls around the data centers. These modular designs are just can sit out in the open, and sometimes with the roof overhead or not, doesn't really matter. And this gives us just direct access to the air from outside and just run that through the data center. And then it also allows us to, again, to scale up and down very, very quickly. And when a certain amount of failure of the components inside has happened, you can just take apart the modular design, pick it up, and send it back to the supplier to get a new one or get it repaired. Again, very, 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 very quick to scale, and you can see that we've had a huge reduction in our PUE with the new design. So again, getting very efficient in how the data centers actually scale. So here is a Gen 4, just going more in detail into the Gen 4. You can actually see how the modular unit is being built here. The air handling unit sits on the top, so that's bringing in the air from the outside, chilling that air, and then running it through the server loads themselves, through the racks. And then you can see the IT aspect and how those come together. You can see in the bottom photo, you can see where the vaporization chamber is being connected to the air handling unit. And how that, again, the modular design and how those can be built just sitting outside. So again, very, very efficient and very low water usage. So again, has really helped our data centers scale. Another important aspect of this is the fact that with all of those modular containers and then with the way we're doing our data centers, it provides a high level of reliability by allowing us to quickly, scale up our data centers. We have geo-redundant ones so that even if a whole data center is knocked offline or has a massive failure of some sort, we have a complete replication to another data center within the same region. And this really helps us think about, when a data center fails over, making sure that everything is available to our customers. And it provides the 99.9 financially backed SLA that we offer with Office 365, so that we always have a high availability and can provide customers money back if we go below that amount. So Office 365, now those data centers, when you think about that, that's really around Microsoft's data centers. And Office 365 is just one of the many online services that Microsoft offers. When you think about Windows Azure, Xbox Live, etc., our data centers have a lot of different services that we're running in them. And so Office 365 is sort of a data center within those data centers. It shares the mechanical and electronic aspects, but we have completely separate, physically isolated hardware from our consumer services, so there's no commingling between, say, Xbox Live data and Office 365 data. Those things sit in separate physical hardware. And then there's also separate networks and separate storage, again, for all of these aspects of the service. So we don't commingle our consumer services and our business services. And so those are run on separate components within the data centers themselves. So now going into which service components really within Office 365 and how those are tied together and which ones you will use. For this area here, this is one I think just a few of the questions I've seen. It's got some different areas around. There've been questions around SKUs and everything. This is more about how we think about it internally inside of Microsoft, and so this is again designed just to give you a view into how we actually build and architect the service. In some ways, this might seem confusing because it's not actually in the end necessarily how you will see it, but hopefully this will give you kind of more of an understanding of how the services are actually linked together. So at the base layer, you have the services. Services really represent Exchange, SharePoint, and Lync, and just the full breadth within that server, everything that they are capable of doing. Service plans are really the next layer on top of that, and that's where we've actually tweaked the version to map to the features that we want to make available at a certain point. So for example, the way to think of this in the in the packaged software world. So if we're not thinking about Office 365 at all, and you just think about the traditional software, we used to have, and I mean we still do have in some cases, if you were to purchase say Exchange Server 2010 Standard or Exchange Server Enterprise 2010, you got a different set of functionality based on which server version that you purchased. And so the service plans are essentially that being done in the services world. So certain functionality can be enabled or disabled at the service plan level. Then you have the SKUs, is what we call them internally. Externally, they're referred to often as the plans or as the suites of Office 365. And those are things like Office 365, Enterprise, E3, and that's really where we group together different service plans and then package those into an offering for customers to actually then go and subscribe to. And that's how customers can actually subscribe to the Office 365 service, is by getting a different SKU service plan that allows them to access the appropriate service plans and services based on their subscription. And so that's how it's divided up inside the service, so we can mix and match different capabilities and provide those to customers. So just looking at some of the questions, the SKUs, we don't typically call them SKUs in the external world. I think if you're really trying to understand the Office 365, the different suites that are available, the different service plans that are available, I think a really good resource are the Office 365 service descriptions. So if you haven't seen those before, just go to office365sd.com, and you can see here we have these service descriptions, and they're available for Office 365 as a platform, so all of the parts that are shared across the services, and then Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, the web apps, the Office 365 Pro Plus, Project, and Lync Online. And then if you click into individual services, you're able to get a table of options, and then also shows you which features and functionality are available in the different plans. So this can help you understand the different features that are available as you move up between the different service offerings. So in my slide, I refer to it as a SKU. So these would be individual SKUs, but externally we just refer to them by their name. For example, Office 365 mid-sized business. And so these charts can be a good way if you're looking for a deep technical way of understanding what the differences are. A nice thing too is that we also provide you the latest server version, so you can compare the server version and how that compares to the different online offerings as well. So this gives you a good resource to understand what's available, what's not available. And again, you can see that for a lot of for all of the different services. I'm just going to type in everyone can have access to that link. Great. So hopefully everyone can see that. So that's a good way to help you compare and understand that. So now moving on. So when we think about Office 365 from a technical aspect, there's actually quite a few different layers in how the services are connected together. Office 365 is really a set of independently run services that are highly federated. And so what this means is that, again, to increase resiliency and reduce the ability for a single point of failure, we've enabled all these services that run independently of one another, so that if one does happen to have a service issue, the other services are not impacted by it. So when you think about Office 365 services, you have ones like SharePoint, Exchange, Link, web apps, etc. But then there are platform level services that a lot of people don't realize they're actually independent of the Office 365 services. So for example, everything that manages the licensing and billing aspects is its own service. The identity platform, which has been recently rebranded and launched as the Windows Azure Active Directory, which is available completely separate from Office 365, is again its own service. So identity is its own service that the other Office 365 workloads connect into. Authentication and DNS are other platform level services that are examples of that. And then Office 365, built on top of that, you have some of the portals that really bring together a lot of these services. So from, for example, the tenant administration portal, that is then bringing together the identity platform, the billing and commerce platform, the authentication platform, and all of the SharePoint Exchange and Link services into a single view that you, the customer, experience. But you're actually going through multiple layers and services all being connected together and federated. But they're, again, in the background, they're all running independently. So it's just it's an important view to understand how those different aspects fit together. So when thinking about the layers of Office 365, I mentioned in the beginning just quickly that there was an aspect of it that is sort of a platform, but really Office 365 is software as a service, not platform as a service. But one of the things in the new Office 365 is that we do have a way to use Office 365 as a platform in terms of letting you expose your new applications with a new cloud app model inside of Office, SharePoint, and this gives you the ability to create apps that are running separately from the Office 365 service, but then have those be exposed inside of Excel, Word, inside of the Excel and Word web apps, inside of Outlook, inside of the Outlook web app, and inside of SharePoint. So this allows you to then let data that's inside of your apps be accessed by other applications. In this example here, you can see where someone has created a mapping application that is pulling in the data from the Excel spreadsheet and then mapping that out on this separate service. And so this is useful, for example, if you wanted to connect to, say, line of business applications in your organization. You can imagine if you had, say, tracking numbers or order numbers or customer numbers, you could be pulling up that account information and having that be exposed inside of the document that the person is working in without any issues there. And it also allows you to still store that data wherever the service is running. So you could actually have Office 365, which is being stored and run in Microsoft's cloud. You could actually use the cloud app model and integrate applications where your data is still being stored on premises, for example. You don't actually have to house that data to expose it with the cloud app model. You don't have to house the data together. So you can actually have those things be independent and run wherever is best for your organization. Another important aspect of what Office 365 has improved upon is the ability to do hybrid configurations. So with Office 365, we know that a lot of customers are moving from some of their on-premises infrastructures. And so we provide different options for, depending on the type of workload that you have, in connecting that with Office 365, either to help just enable migration or to create a coexistent state where you actually continue to manage some content on-premise and to move some content into Office 365. So for example here, this screenshot, really what I'm showing is sort of how we've been able to integrate the administration experience for Exchange so that you can manage both on-prem users and online users in the same Exchange admin console. So you can actually integrate those and have one management experience for your users, for your admin really, to manage the environment, whether you have some servers on-prem or in the cloud. With SharePoint, for example, SharePoint sites really have to be in one location or another. So what we've enabled then is the ability to have federated search. So you can set up a trust, either one-way or two-way trust, with the Office 365, so that you could have users search, say, from your on-prem environment, and it will search both the SharePoint Online content and the SharePoint on-prem. And so this federated search enables it so that users don't have to know, oh, this SharePoint site's located, in SharePoint Online, this one's located in the on-premise server. Your users don't have to think about that at all. It makes it a much more seamless experience. And then with Link you can do some split domain now, which allows you to have, say, some users using the IM and presence information in Office and be using Link Online, while still having, say, users who need other capabilities, such as enterprise voice. You can keep those on-prem and still have it all appear as one Link network to your end users. So this allows, again, for more advanced configuration. So I mentioned earlier, I talked quickly about security. There's a lot more content on security, privacy, and trust. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today, just quickly go through it. But if you're interested in more on this, you can go to the Office 365 Trust Center and get a detailed view on some of the areas. One, of course, is privacy. We take that very seriously. We don't use the data for advertising. We don't have advertising built into Office 365. I already mentioned earlier the fact that we don't mingle our data between the consumer services, that we have physical isolation between our consumer services and our online services, or excuse me, our commercial services. And then also the fact that, we always consider that data is owned by the customer, meaning that you own it, you can remove it, your data whenever you choose, and it's always in your full control. We'll never use it for any of our purposes, and again, no mining. On the transparency standpoint, again, the data maps that are available on the Trust Center if you want to understand where your data is being located and what regions. You have audit logs available to you so that you can see if for some reason your data is ever needs to be accessed and why. And then again, you can choose updates related to security, privacy, and audit information. From a compliance standpoint, I touched on this about industry certifications earlier. But we have a lot of certifications both inside of the U.S. And we have ones that are more global as well, such as EU model clauses and the UK G Cloud IL2 certification. So we're working with different governments around the world to make sure that we're meeting different standards so that Office 365 is usable in whatever region you need. And then also, certain industries, for example, within the U.S. we have the Office 365 Government Cloud, which meets the FISMA and CGIS certifications for customers who have those needs inside of the U.S. From a security standpoint of our data centers, obviously we have 24-hour security facilities that are monitoring the data centers themselves. We have a recent thing that we've been talking about. If you're really interested in the advanced security, I highly recommend you check out the white paper that's available on the Office 365 Trust Center. But we go into detail around our BitLocker encryption that we use. So we have full encryption at rest of Exchange Online data, so that all Exchange Online has AES 256 bit encryption on it. We also use HTTPS for encryption in transit. And then if you want to have encryption on your other aspects of your data, you can, depending on the suite that you purchase, you can use the Windows Azure Rights Management Service, or you can connect Office 365 to a rights management server that you're running on premise and use that for additional IRM encryption. So for the scenario there is if you want to, say, encrypt Word or PowerPoint or other types of documents, you can use the rights management service to information rights protect and encrypt those documents. We also have some advanced data loss prevention tools. I recommend you check out those as well if you're interested in terms of what can you do for more of the security controls that we give you. So some security aspects are really more run by the service for every customer, and then others are done more at a, hey, customer, you can choose how you want to configure these security settings for what's appropriate for your organization. So I see a quick question. Is IRM service free? No, you have to have a Office 365 service where it's included. So it is, for example, I believe right now you need Office 365 Enterprise E3 to have the rights management service included in Office 365. So, and then talking quickly about continuity, I've mentioned this a couple times about the redundancy, but basically, again, financially backed SLA, you can see our SLAs are available online. We link to them from the Office 365 service descriptions, and we have advanced 24/7 support available to handle issues around Office 365 when those do come up. So now quickly I want to do a demonstration of the administration portal and just talk a little bit about administration in Office 365. So if I bring over here, here is the Office 365 administration portal, so you can see that. Quick question. Yes, RMS and E3. Yes, it works. It works if it's been done at the SharePoint level. Individual documents can't be opened if they've been protected. But if it's a SharePoint library, they can be opened. So again, you should check out the more details on the RMS page. But it's done for the documents in the Office web apps. Has to be done at the SharePoint library level. So when we look at the Office 365 Admin Center, you can see here this is the new dashboard for getting you started. You can see this is a new tenant I set up, so it's got some quick start videos to give you kind of an overview of how to get started. And then we provide some of the most common areas of concern for the admin. Things like service health are available right away. If they have any service requests that they're having with support, those are available here. We provide a quick report, and these reports are obviously empty since this is a demonstration tenant, and I'm not actually sending an email from it, for example. And then on the left-hand side, we have the nav bar with all of the different areas of management within the Office 365 Admin Center. And on the right-hand side, we have some of the shortcuts and resources of common areas for the admin. Across the top, what's new in the recent release of Office 365 is we have a common nav bar that follows the user throughout their different services. And so this admin tab up at the top, you can see here we've got Office 365, Exchange, Link, and SharePoint. This admin tab only appears, again, for the admin, right? So the normal user would just see Outlook through Sites, possibly the three dots if they have additional services. But this is contextual to the user that's logged in, and it follows you throughout as you move between the different services. So now from here, if you want to go to the Exchange Admin Console, the Link Admin Console, or the SharePoint Admin Console, you can do that right from clicking here and move between the different admin consoles very easily. So when you come in, one of the areas to think about is your setup and domains. This is where you can control getting Office 365 set up and run for your organization. I'm not going to step through the full tutorial, but it makes you choose your domain, and then it helps you think through some of the areas of like what type of migration do you want to do to get your data, how do you want to move your users, and how to start using your services. In this demo tenant, I've already provisioned users. So here you can see if I go to the users and groups, this is what I was referring to earlier when I talked about, independent but highly federated services. This data is actually sitting inside of Windows Azure Active Directory, and it's being surfaced inside of the Office 365 admin portal, which is really aggregating a lot of individual services together. So here, this is where you can do, your basic user management, things like resetting their passwords, but you can also assign licenses, etc. And all of this can also be managed with PowerShell if you want to do it through automation and scripting. You can also set up things like security groups and delegated administrators. So if you have partners that maybe your organization works with and you want them to be administering parts of Office 365 on your behalf, you can set those up here as well. And then the other aspect is from an identity standpoint is really, is the user stored in the cloud, or do you have them connected to an on-prem Active Directory? And so you can learn more about how to set up Active Directory synchronization with a tool known as DirSync that allows you to basically manage all your users still on-prem and have those identities get synced up to Office 365. Here's the licensing area. You can see I've got my trial license, and it shows the subscription that I have and when it's going to expire. And then also I've got the ability to see, what's been assigned, not assigned with Office 365 and which users. And with the licensing, again, this is bringing in information from yet another service, the Commerce platform. So again, just trying to connect you to what you're seeing here, to how the service is actually run and maintained, and what those slides were about that I was showing you earlier. Service settings is another example of this, where we've actually, integrated some of the different settings from the individual administration portals. So here you can see things like sites, and this will take you to the SharePoint one if you want to manage certain link settings. But then there's also settings that are unique to the service here. This is the user software section. This lets you manage if users can individually download the software and install it themselves. So, for example, if you're in a highly managed environment, you might disable this where you're going to be pushing out the software through your, System Center or other software distribution mechanism. And then, this is where you can learn manual deployment, and you can get software for the Mac, so Office for Mac and Link for Mac, which are part of Office 365 Pro Plus. Things like password management. This is password management is an interesting one. This was originally available just in PowerShell, but a lot of customer feedback around, wanting to be able to manage this directly in the UI. So that was one that we added here in the UI. Some of the community settings, rights management. So we talked a little bit about rights management. In this trial tenant, again, I have the rights management, so you can go actually to and disable or enable it based on what you want in your organization for that user. So it's a good way to be able to control and manage at the tenant-wide level whether or not you are using Windows Azure RMS. And you can't you can't have both Windows Azure RMS and an on-prem rights management server. You have to choose one or the other. So here you can choose whether you want to activate it or not inside of the tenant. And then from a mobile standpoint, this is where you can manage if you connect to the BlackBerry Business Cloud services. This is where you can manage that as well. We have the service health section, which really allows you to get a view into the service and if there's been any if there are any interruptions going on, and you can also see what's happened if there is interruption. We've got a kind of a key here at the bottom telling you what's going on with the service. You can also expand different areas and get more detail about individual services inside of Office 365, and you can subscribe to the RSS feed so you get updates pushed to you around any changes in the service health. You can also see plan maintenance up here. On the reports, in the reports area, this is where we can surface. My reports will all be empty again because this is a demo tenant. But basically, if you had real data here, you could see when users and things, mailboxes are being added, deleted, etc. Different types of rules that are going. And then the other aspect, these are just some of the reports that we've picked, but we actually have over on if you look at the right-hand side, we have the mail reports in Excel, and this actually is using the OData feeds that we expose, and you can use this with Excel, with the new version of Excel to look at the OData feeds and create your own custom reports based on the data that's available here. And we're also, right now we have mostly Exchange reports, and we're looking at adding more reports from the other services as well. We definitely think this will be a really useful area for admins. From support, this is where you're able to then create service requests and actually call technical support, for example. And then purchase services, this is where you can then add on additional services to your subscription or change them and add those. And when you purchase services here, remember you still have to go back to your users and then assign the licenses appropriately based on what services you want to have available for your individual users. I saw just one quick question, where did FOPI go? So FOPI became Exchange Online Protection in this latest release. So here you can see, for example, where I just used the admin bar and I went to the Exchange admin. Again, the admin bar follows you, so you can quickly bounce back to the Office 365. And here in the Exchange Admin Center, I can manage my users from an Exchange perspective. I can do things like, disable Exchange Active Sync, or I can, disable the ability to access OA. I can enable archiving, etc. But here's where the thought went when I saw that question. It's now called Exchange Online Protection. So this is where you can manage, malware, filter spam, quarantine, etc. And all of those settings are available to you here. All right, so going back to now that we've done a kind of an overview of that, let's go back to the presentation. I just saw a question over here around, can someone upgrade from Home Premium? No, Home Premium is a consumer service, and it is separate from the Office 365 commercial services. So I showed you the user groups and identity, but I just want to quickly walk you through some of the identity options and things to think about. Really, it's using the Windows Azure Active Directory, as we've mentioned before, and this is a cloud service that is separate and independent from Office 365. It is not your AD controllers running in Windows Azure. That is a separate thing, and you could run your domain controllers in Windows Azure and connect those to Windows Azure Active Directory. But again, it is a separate concept. That is really more infrastructure as a service versus this offering, which is software as a service, where we're managing the servers on your behalf. So then you can see today you can go and actually do a preview if you just want to use just Windows Azure Active Directory, not with Office 365, and you can actually manage that and maintain it separately and use it for other services as well. But with Office 365, you have a couple options for your cloud identity. So when you think about using the Windows Azure Active Directory, that is going to handle the authentication. So when someone logs into Office 365, it's actually going to pass the request to Windows Azure Active Directory and make sure that the person, has the rights and privileges to access what they're trying to get. And you can add users very easily with just doing, say, a CSV import into the service. Now, for larger organizations, they're probably going to want to use with their on-prem Active Directory, they're probably going to want to use DirSync to sync up those objects into Windows Azure Active Directory. But when they do so, they're still going to allow Windows Azure Active Directory to do the authentication. So when a user tries to log in, that'll still do the check with the service. Now, for some organizations that want to have true federation, they'll actually set up the Active Directory Federation services and set up a one-way trust with Windows Azure Active Directory. And when this happens, you no longer use the Windows Azure Active Directory to do the authentication. What happens is that when Office 365, when a user tries to log in and make a request, we actually then reroute to your Active Directory Federation service and do the check with your Federation service first to get the STS token. So that's when the actual authorization is handled by your on-prem servers. So there's really, just to summarize what you just saw there, there's really three different ways you can connect to Office 365. You can just use the directory directly in Office 365 and manage it there using either the UI or with PowerShell. You can connect to your on-prem directory with DirSync. Or you can set up full federation where you actually keep the passwords and the authentication managed in your environment and have that be the final setting for trust, and just do a one-way trust synchronization to Windows Azure Active Directory. Again, just giving you some more details on some of the Active Directory. I'm going to go past this since we only have a few minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit more about Office 365 Pro Plus. We do support some non-Active Directory options through a verified program. We only support third parties that we've labeled as the Works with Office 365 integration, and they have the correct single sign-on tokens to work in our scenarios. In education, we can also support the Shibboleth single sign-on federation as well. So when we think about the desktop, Office 365 really it covers a lot of different areas. So Office 365 Pro Plus is really the new version of Office for the service. So this means that you can have 5, because we use user, it's no longer a version of Office tied to a device, as Office has been for the last 25 years or so. It's really now using the individual, the person's account, to manage that copy of Office. So this means we can do things like enable that person to install Office on 5 different PCs or Macs. It allows things like roaming, so that, for example, if you open a document on one device and then make some changes and save it, we can then show you your recent documents on the next device that you go to. And if you store that document on one of our cloud services like SkyDrive Pro, you can then of course start working right where you left off. Obviously, as I mentioned before, upgrades are included. So as we introduce new versions of Office, those will be included in your subscription. And with the new Click to Run, makes it much easier to install Office to new devices very quickly, streaming that down to the device and caching it locally for offline access. Office on Demand is actually, if you're, say, for example, using a kiosk, we can actually stream down an individual instance of an application for a one-time use to a user. You access that through your SkyDrive Pro. If you go there and look on the left-hand side, you'll see the ability to use Office on Demand and stream down, say, just Excel or just Word for one use. It's cached just in the temporary internet files, and so as soon as the user logs off, it's then flushed from the computer and doesn't use one of the installs that you have. So when you're thinking about Office 365 Pro Plus, with traditional Office deployments, you used a software distribution to deploy and manage to those systems. And you downloaded your Office bits from the Volume Licensing Center. But now, if your company had the home use program, you might have gotten it on your home that way. But now with Office 365 Pro Plus, you are able to get the bits from the Office CDN and then push those out manually if you want, or you can let users self-install directly from the portal from the getting started area, or you can, again, you can let them do this. You can also, the nice thing about this is you don't have to download the bits every time. If you want to, say, download from the CDN network, put it on a file share and let users from your internal network, or put it on a USB stick and install it. You don't have to then download directly from Office 365 every time. You just have to do that once, and you can still install the bits and cache them locally. Again, Office 365 Pro Plus, I think one of the largest points of confusion is that sometimes people think that it's being run hosted like in a data center, and it's not. It is still being cached locally on the individual device for users to use it in those instances. So with Office 365 Pro Plus, we've changed the activation model, and that's what really enables moving away from the device activation and using instead the user. So this is really where you have, in the past, you had to have a KMS server or a MAC key, and you had that service manage all of your keys for each version that you installed. But really, with Office 365, you're moving away from that to having instead the activation service be part of Office 365. And so no matter what device the person's connecting to, they then go to our service to manage the keys. So again, you just manage the user's identity and their license, and then we manage the actual activation of all the versions of devices they've installed Office on. So if they do happen to get to, say, their 6th device, we can then prompt the user that, hey, which other device version of Office do you want to disable? So that's a way, again, of managing that on your behalf. So that, again, takes away that aspect of it, and you just manage the user's ID and account. So the Office web apps, which are really kind of the companion to the desktop client apps, are the browser versions of Office. And I think it's important to understand that there is a difference between our consumer services and our Office 365 services. And so with the consumer services, those are the ones that are available through, say, SkyDrive and Outlook.com, which is the new name for Hotmail.com, and they're associated with your Microsoft account, or what used to be called a Live ID. In Office 365, again, those web apps are associated with your Windows Azure Active Directory ID. And so, again, they're separate things. And you can also, of course, run the web apps on-prem as well if you're interested in doing that. But again, these are being, again, they're integrated as part of Office 365, and they're just integrated into, say, the SharePoint, the Exchange experience, etc. So when we think about in the 2010 era, what was really happening is that each SharePoint farm had an Office Web App server, and then Lync and Exchange had their own ways of viewing Office Web Apps. The big change in the latest version is that Web Apps has become its own standalone service. Just like how I said the Exchange is its own service, SharePoint is its own service, the Office Web Apps are their own service in this new version. And so as users create different instances of SharePoint and document viewing, they're actually then just calling on that service to do the document rendering and display. And Exchange is doing the same thing when you view an attachment inside of Exchange, or in Lync when you're doing, when you have Lync rendering the document directly. So you can, again, have the Office Web Apps supplying it in that method. So I think we're just about out of time. So I want to see, Josh, do we have time for a few questions? I'm going to not try and get through any more slides at this point in time.
Yeah, great presentation.